So hello and welcome to another video. This time we're going to talk about the 5 most common mistakes when selecting plastics in medical technology. Let's just get into it. I'm Lucas Pianegonda and I've helped over 30 MedTech companies to choose the right plastic for their application and be more sustainable with it. So let's get into the topic. So the first mistake that everybody makes is that there is not a structured selection process for your plastics in medical technology. There are 2 variations of it. Number one is the project manager decides which plastic is going to be used. And in this case, the material strategy gets a little confusing. So everybody selects their own supplier. They go to a fair, they see a supplier, they talk to them, they seem very competent. And then you have another supplier on your supplier list, which is pretty difficult to handle after a time because there are unnecessarily many suppliers. And the quality of the selection, of the material selection, is of course dependent on the project manager. And there is the mistake number 2, that there's a procurement decides, and this ties in perfectly with mistake number 2. And then there is the variation number 3, that is we take existing rates, which will tie in perfectly with mistake number 4. So the second mistake is you go for cheap instead of high price to value ratio, which is one of the second most common mistakes. So you just take a cheap one. So what you should be doing is you have a material that costs less for what it can do. Just going for price gives you poor quality because poor quality materials are cheaper. And I'm going to steal an anecdote here. That is from a material supplier if you recognize this, thank you very much for the anecdote because I really like it. It was about some sort of TPE. A customer called them and said, hey, I need a TPE for this and this application. Just give me the cheapest one you have. And then he said, are you sure? Because I want to know about the requirements. And then he said, it's none of your business. Just give me the cheapest ones. And a half a year later, he asked about, hey, do we have an irritation test for this grade? And then he said, the supplier, yeah, no, we don't have that. And then he was very angry, the customer, but he realized that he said, yeah, it's none of your business. Just give me the cheapest ones. So it's very important to talk about the requirements you have before talking about price, because it's the value to price ratio is the most important thing. And just going for cheap is costing you dearly. And this ties in perfectly with mistake number 5 that we're going to see at the end. And then we have the mistake number 3, which is not evaluating the regulatory support. It's what the material can do and what its price is one thing. But the regulatory support is another, meaning that you need a supplier that supports you with statements, that supports you with biocompatibility data, or even formulation disclosure towards your biocompatibility lab. And I would always go for a very, very responsive material supplier. Even if they cannot give you the answer that you're looking for, I want an answer quickly. Meaning that if I get a customer request or if a regulation changes and I write to my supplier and I don't get an answer within a week or a few days, that is not acceptable. You need a very good regulatory support in order to be responsive and in order to work with the material. So the best material, the best performance, and the best price doesn't help you anything if you cannot get the regulatory statements, the information that you're looking for in order to get your approval. So this is very, very key, and people neglect that very often. Then mistake number 4, and I said in the beginning that mistake number 2 and number 4 are 2 of the defaults. So either you just go for the cheapest, then procurement decides. And mistake number 4 is we've always taken this material. We've always done it like this, or we've always used this grade. Those are variations of the same theme. You just lock in cost, you lock in overengineering, you miss out on sustainability gains. Taking what you've always taken is the conservative thing to do. It will work, but you do not improve. So it is oftentimes the default. We have an approved material that works. Just by the way, there is no approval. There's no medical approval for a grade. There's only approvals for devices, meaning that it is always the grade that has to be evaluated. And if you have no experience with it, it's the natural thing to do to just be very conservative, but you will never make improvements this way. And there are materials that are like 50 years in their medical devices. For example, PTFE, there are devices that are 50 years made from PTFE, and maybe there are cheaper, better, more sustainable options to take, but you just lock that in. And then you have materials as PTFE, PVC, polycarbonate, POM that have future compliance risks because like PFAS and PVC and BPA and the formaldehyde, they're potentially to be regulated in the future, meaning that it's very important to keep those things on the horizon. And if you have projects running where you're thinking about using PTFE because you've always used this, and there is the PFAS ban coming up, there will be a ban in some sort. If fluoropolymers are going to be in there or not, like currently it's looking like they're in there, meaning you're locking in a compliance risk. And that's just not reasonable to do. So just because you've always used it doesn't mean that it's a good future choice. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. So you should have a structured process looking at those future compliance risks. And then mistake number 5, and that is what I call the grade selection latency. And it's the failure to account for it, which is one of the most common mistakes. So what grade selection latency is about is you have the evaluated property, and then you have a snapshot at which you are doing your evaluation. And the properties change over time. And this might be something like price. Prices are variable, and the point of time you are evaluating the price at the time evaluating is not the price that you will get when you launch it on the market. So you have green and you have the red curves, and the red curve is obviously higher at the time of evaluation, so the green gets better prices. But that might go up and down, and when you're launching at the market, which can be like 3 to 5 years in MedTech easily, then you have a higher price at the green one, which was previously cheaper. So you have to take into account that prices will fluctuate, and that maybe like a 2-cent difference in kilo price is not going to be very significant in the future. You'll have to understand the base criteria or the base mechanisms influencing the price, and that production location, feedstock, and production methodology, including production volume, are all influencing the price. We're talking about price here, but like mistake number 4 ties in also very good with this. So if you imagine that this is compliance, future compliance, so PTFE might be compliant now, but that may be a step answer, meaning that from a certain time in the future, it's no longer compliant. And if that is later than your market launch, or if that is within the life cycle of your product, you're going to have an issue. And if you're not taking into account that there is a latency to the property of what you're evaluating, like compliance or price, that is an issue. So price, compliance, availability, they can all vary over time. Like the technical properties do not, but there are things that vary, like price especially. And the plastic selection is only a snapshot, and you need to anticipate the trends into the future, and you need to account for the uncertainty in this property in your material selection process. So in summary, you need a structured process Just going for cheap doesn't cut it. You need a good price to value ratio. Then you need the regulatory support. Even if you don't think that it's going to be a very critical component, you're going to need statements. You're going to need support. No support is no option. We've always done it like this. Locks in cost, locks in compliance risks, and locks in overengineering. So always looking at the material and then reverting back to the reference sometimes is okay, but you should be always challenge the status quo and evaluate it against the state of the art. And then you should account for latency. There is a certain uncertainty in your material selection because the market launch is sometime in the future. And the more time it is in the future, the more you need to account for the uncertainty. Good. So if you are avoiding these mistakes, you can improve your cost, you can decrease your ecological footprint, and you can improve the patient outcome, decrease the time to market. And the most important point is you can de-risk your product. You can make sure that your product has less risks and therefore be more safe to invest in. And yeah, at that point, I'd like you to thank you for watching the video. If you are a MedTech company and you want to design your devices for more sustainability, just click the link in the description below. There's a video helping you to figure out how to do that. And if you like the video, like, comment, and subscribe, because YouTube will show you more videos like this. If YouTube knows what you like, it will show you more videos like this, and this is the reason that you should do it. It obviously supports me, so if you'd like to support me, that helps. And if you have a request for a video or if you have a question, just write it in the comments below and I will answer it. So thank you very much for watching. As always, a pleasure to bring value to you, and have a very good one.